No pasa. Hola. Hola.
Yes, I hear
Hi.
you now. Okay, great.
Oh, thanks God. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
oh wait.
we are very far away from each other. It's amazing this is working at all.
No, I did one with Tom Fontana yesterday. Yeah, and it works. He had a lot of fun. Do you
Oh,
know Tom Fontana?
yeah, he's a TV producer. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I used to watch Oz when I was younger, and yeah, we start talking because he's from New York, but he's Italian from origin. I mean, his grandparents were Italian, so we share a lot of mannerism. He's like, I think New Yorkers, I kind of us because I mean, they're like kind of Italians, I think.
Yeah. Well, my great grandparents were from Milan,
Hmm.
so I'm Italian. Braga, in my case, is Italian. A lot of people think it's Portuguese, but it's Italian.
Oh wow! Well,
Yeah.
so I mean, well, the idea of this is to relax and we are two guys fans of sci-fi horror and the mate, as you know, in Argentinian tradition, is a way of you get together and with friends and you just hang out. That's the
Okay.
whole idea.
Okay.
You received the mails I sent you before because I sent you some Cortázar. Remember Julio Cortázar short stories?
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
Did you have the chance to read them?
No, not yet. I haven't, just because I just had the pandemic hit, and I had to finish the movie. It's just been a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, okay. Now, well, here we are returning to normal life. Now I will send you the mate and alfajores because I asked Hannah send her my regards.
I
I
will.
will send to you and to Hannah the mate and alfajores as a
Thank you.
traditional,
Thank
so
you.
you can. Well, I saw Book of Blood. I told to a lot of directors here, horror directors who also are fans of Clive Barker. They have their own Clive Barker story, as you that you spend I don't know how many hours waiting for the autograph.
Yeah.
Uh, well, there are some stories kind of similar here. There's a director, Demian Rugna, who made a movie called Terrified, who's now it's an excellent movie. I will send you if
Oh,
you
great.
have time.
Yeah.
And now Guillermo del Toro is going to remake it, and he called him to direct the remake. So,
Oh,
well, it's
great. That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, no, and well, he's a fan of Clive Barker. We did a live yesterday, and he sent, I think, 15 years ago, a written letter to Clive Barker with a DVD copy of his first movie, so they can see. And he answered. He said, "Okay, I will see it when I have time."
That's great.
Oh.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, Clive is
Uh,
great about that. Yeah.
and tell me, what was the first, encounter with Clive Barker? How old were you?
Well, I was probably 20 years old, and I had just read the Books of Blood. This was in like 1985 or something. I mean, it was a long time ago. And I stood in line for 3 hours at a bookstore. It was his first American book signing. And I stood in line. I was eighth in line, and he drew a picture, and I remember it so vividly. He does not remember meeting me, of course, but I remember meeting him. So all these years later, to be able to work with him, one of my idols, has just been an amazing, incredible experience.
No, really. One of the question I wanted to ask, and I want to, the subjects I wanted to discuss was the impact or the contribution of Clive Barker, not only in literature, because in horror literature, many people talk about, Poe, Lovecraft, Stephen King, but the contribution of Clive Barker is amazing because he is a guy. I mean, when you read Clive Barker, you're going to come to find original and disturbing ideas. But the originality, I think, is its contribution. What do you think in literature? What is the main contribution of Clive Barker?
Well, I agree with you completely. Originality. You know, there are no vampires or werewolves or zombies in his stories. Nothing you've ever seen or thought of before. His monsters are new. His themes are unexplored. So originality is the word I would use as well. But what's unique about Clive Barker is he released all of his horror writing all at once. All 6 volumes of Books of Blood came out at once. It would be like if the Beatles released all their albums on the same day. And in talking to Clive, you know, he doesn't consider himself a horror writer. That was his horror. He moved on to fantasy and dark fantasy and children's literature. What's so unique about his work is that those 6 volumes came out, and they're still kind of sending reverberations and shockwaves, you know, and they're still influential. But I think that has to be kind of unique. It would be the equivalent of Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft kind of coming out with their stuff all at once. You know, it's really kind of amazing. I don't think it's ever been done, you know, and people, you can imagine those 6 volumes coming out over the course of a decade or more. So it was something else. I mean, it's, you know, and there are still stories in there that, you know, we would like to make into more movies, you know, and remake in better versions of some of the stories.
Actually, Demian Rugna and other directors from the new Argentinian horror, because there's a new wave of Argentinian. We are starting.
Great.
So, and they wanted to ask Clive if they can do some of their stories there. Can we? I mean, because they are big fans, and there's a new generation here in Argentina is starting. I mean, during the quarantine, actually, there's a director called Max Coronel, a young director, like he's in 30s, and he did a movie using Zoom, a horror movie. Now you can watch it in YouTube, watch movies now. It's very well made, very independent, of course, but it's incredible. And he did it on Zoom during the quarantine, because in Argentina we have low budget. Low budget is the rule, and this guy, Max, did this movie, and it's really scary, really well done. I mean, because a lot of American actors and directors, I talk to them, no, we don't do anything in quarantine. I say, no, we can't. And so I'll send you.
Well,
it's incredible.
Great. So many horror movies, are tend to be independent and and innovative. You know, horror, one could argue, is the most innovative genre because it has to be, because there's usually not enough money. And they're usually smaller with less people, so they lend themselves to, you know, it's usually one or a couple people alone in a house or something, you know, so you could do it during a pandemic. Yeah, most definitely. And I'm really excited to hear that there's a new wave of horror coming from you and your country, because the best horror to me, and the horror I look out for, is not American horror movies. You know, there may be 1 or 2 great horror movies that come out in America each year, you know, truly, you know, great. But, you know, I think of the French new wave of horror that came out in the first part of the 2000s, a film like Martyrs, or I think of Iranian horror, was it Under the Shadow, that came out a few years ago? And I just saw a Turkish horror movie. I can't remember the name. It was truly frightening. I can't remember what it was called, but it was so weird and different. So I really am interested in horror movies that come from other places with different sensibilities and different cultural histories. You know, so bring Argentinian horror to America, please.
Yeah. Actually, well, this we start with a couple of friends from Mexico, Spain. This network. I mean, the fan scene is like a network. Now I'm introducing. I love to introduce people, as you know. I'm talking to people from Australia and Russia. I'm like you know, trying to to do this kind of network to do co-productions, right? Because I remember we talked last time about flash forward, the idea of an event, a world event, and do these anthologies in different countries. That would be great.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, unfortunately, we're for the first time in our generation, we are having a collective experience. But it's a virus, so it kind of sucks.
Yeah, I'm talking about literature. I mean, one of the things that there's always this challenge of taking horror novels to the screen to make a film, and I think literature has an advantage from film, that is, it can scare you with ideas. Of course, it can create an atmosphere as Lovecraft did, but also it can express disturbing ideas, and that's the thing. That's the thing Clive Barker has. He come up with ideas that really disturb. I mean, it's not not only the atmosphere, but I mean these creature situations that creates. I mean, and it has to do with all this, existential nihilistic that we talk about when we talk about martyrs. I mean, there's a lot of, and in Books of Love, in your movie, I think you try to, express this idea of existential crisis, especially in the first story, the one about the woman. Yes. I mean, that for me is a drama, a disturbing drama, but would you agree with that?
Yes. Completely. You don't need me to answer questions. You're answering your own questions beautifully. Clive Barker, this movie, Books of Blood, has received a mixed reaction among fans. A lot of people love it. Some people hate it. And I'm very used to that kind of reaction because of my many years when I did Star Trek. The same thing would happen. Because Star Trek is different things to different people, and Star Trek can be very different things. And Clive Barker's collection of the Books of Blood intentionally are very diverse stories. That's why he wrote them, because he realized reading an anthology, and I can't remember the name of it, he's like, horror is not just one thing. But if there's a theme running through his stories, there is a kind of a nihilistic theme. Hellraiser, or Hellbound Heart, the original story, that's just one Clive Barker story. A lot of people think Clive Barker's is Hellraiser, and where's Hellraiser? Where's Pinhead? But most of his stories are very kind of existential, literary, nuanced, subtle stories. And those were the ones I liked. So when I sat down, Midnight Meat Train was a great story, but that's not I liked stories like Life of Death, which is Clive's own personal favorite story, I might add. And it's an amazing short story, and it's so psychological, and it's so subtle. Life of Death, that might, if we are lucky enough to do another volume, maybe we'll make that one. Even a story as horrific as Pig Blood Blues, which is one I would love to adapt, is very psychological and leaves a lot to the imagination. So when I sat down with Clive, we both knew we wanted to do the origin story of the Book of Blood. And that story, the first story in the first volume, it's not very long. It's basically one scene. So we fleshed that out. But what struck me in my initial creative meetings with Clive was that he had other stories to tell. And so I did not expect to tell 2 other new Books of Blood stories, but that's what happened. And Clive grew up, when he was growing up, there was a story of a married couple living in a very ordinary neighborhood, a British couple. Fred and Rose West, I think were their names. And they, for many years, were murdering and torturing and murdering people and putting them in the walls and floors of their home. And they got caught by, I think, a plumber who found like a finger in the drain or something. And they never really explained why they were doing it, other than they started with their own children. And that's
Oh.
how the story of the Jenna story began. And I'm like, well, let's do like the Airbnb from hell. But it developed into something more psychological as it went on, because I wanted to end that story with Jenna going back of her own will. And that's where we started getting into what she was all about, and trauma, and all that kind of stuff. You know, you have to see it to kind of get it, you know. Sorry about that long answer. Sorry about that.
No, please.
I'm clearly really lonely here.
No, it's okay. No, I mean, that the idea is to discuss all these each subjects, and something you did, I really thought that was amazing, is use dialogues to introduce the disturbing ideas of the books, because it's very difficult in the audiovisual media to express an idea. Yes, you can use sounds, music, image, but the idea is better expressed through dialogue, text. And that's something John Carpenter did in The Mouth of Madness, when Sam Neill is looking to the void and the woman is reading. And in this case, in the dialogues, for example, I remember where they talk about this abandoned neighborhood, cursed neighborhood, the idea of a place in the city, because now in the city we live with technology, we feel protected of all the, you know, curses of the ancient, you know, horrors. But in this case, there is a place in the movie where everything is, and they introduce this idea through a dialogue. I think one of the characters start doing that. I think that was wonderful. I mean, the way that, because it's the only way. I mean, do you think there's another way to do this, to express?
If you were discovering if someone was entering a neighborhood, an abandoned neighborhood, and was discovering very slowly that it was haunted, yes, you could do it that way. But I needed to get the idea across more quickly, because that story was something of a framing device for the other stories. And it came out of a Clive Barker idea of, you know, let's take the idea of a haunted house to the next level and do a haunted neighborhood. And what if there was a Chernobyl-like hot zone where some kind of massive supernatural event happened, and the closer you get to it, the more haunted it becomes. And I thought, well, that's a whole movie on its own. But if that hot zone, that epicenter, was where the Books of Blood opened, this might be a really cool framing device. So I had to articulate, hey, this is a neighborhood that for some reason is haunted, and we don't know why, but we're gonna find out that it's Mary's house.
Here's a question. What was the title you mentioned earlier that you would like to adapt the story?
There were two that I mentioned. I mentioned Life of Death and Pig Blood Blues.
And they asked me amargo dulce de mate. Dulce, always. Sweet mate. No, but and a lot of people, I've been, you know, sending you all the poster of Books of Love to a lot of people, and they start watching, and many people say this looks like the first episode of a series. Maybe you can do that. I mean, that would be a good idea.
When I first developed this idea, I developed it as an anthology TV show. And it just became clear. It was actually Hulu that said, what if this was an anthological film, and potentially a series of films? And for some reason, that just really struck me. You know, the very first movie I ever saw in the theater was Tales from the Crypt, in the 1972 version. And I love anthological films. They don't always work. One of the best ones ever made was Wild Tales, which I'm sure you know very well.
Yeah, of course.
That's not a horror. That has some horror-ish things, but it's an anthological film, right? And it's a good one because they're all good. All the stories are good. But I knew that was the best version of the project. Now, having said that, we're hoping, the film is doing pretty well, I'm being told, and we're hoping for a volume 2. But who knows? who knows? And if it's wildly successful, maybe they'll want to do a TV show. But I like the film. I do like the film format. You know, there's a lot of anthology TV out there now, but there's not a lot of anthological movies.
And there was another anthology show, Amazing Movies, that actually they were films, free stories. I think that's the last time I saw like this. Well, there were a lot of anthologies I found, but it was very famous because a lot of big names were involved. Joe Dante, you know, Robert Zemeckis. Well, it was produced by Spielberg. I think it would be to do that, but with a horror genre, Clive Barker's horror.
I would, if they wanted to turn this into an anthology, a TV show, I'd jump at the chance. But you know, or even a volume 2, whatever form. I want to continue working with Clive and bringing his visions to life, both from the books and new visions. I mean, we have a list of 30 new Books of Blood stories. I call them the Lost Volume 7. They've yet to be written, but they've been conceived, and they're just great. So we have a lot of material to work with, you know, and you know, to me, that probably the most successful creatively anthology film that I've seen is Pulp Fiction, and that's what I modeled this after. And just in terms of 3 independent stories that touch each other just enough to move each story a little bit forward, but not too self-consciously.
And what about doing maybe we can organize a Clive Barker anthology with different directors from different parts of the world. I don't know if Clive Barker would agree with that.
Oh, he would love that. I think I can speak for him that he would be all for that, you know. And I love that idea. I mean, you know, if this was a TV show, I can imagine doing that. You know,
great.
It'd be logistically difficult at the moment, but
well,
you know,
not technically, but you can send different script from this different part. Like a lot of people actually is doing that.
Well,
by the way, have you contacted the director of Wild Tales? I send you the contact of the producer.
I think no, we haven't. I think we might have traded emails or something. We haven't quite yet. Met up, but I look forward to meeting him because I love that movie. That's got the best beginning of at first. That's one of the best beginnings of a movie ever.
That's true. And tell me, one of the questions I want to know, because a lot of directors ask me to ask you this, is which were the difficulties to adapt? I mean, when you adapt these short stories, and how you overcome those difficulties?
Well, the writing of the script wasn't that difficult. I think when it was a TV show and we started to develop the stories, we were feeling like we were stretching them out to be an hour when they really weren't. And then when it became a film, I was very grateful because then the stories could just be the length that they should be. The challenge was in making the movie and bringing certain images to life. For instance, in the original story, The Book of Blood, Clive describes the dead people that surround Simon, and he describes them as you have to read the passage. I just cut and paste. I took the passage from the book and pasted it into the script, and just got around to it in pre-production, and then it was like, okay, well now I have to bring this to life. These kind of vacant, idiot, grinning faces he describes them in this weird way, and so I had long discussions with Clive. I was in Nova Scotia filming, and he was in LA writing his latest novel. We didn't want them to look like zombies. We didn't want them to look like they just crawled out of the grave. What were they going to look like? And so we decided to kind of go after this mannequin look. There's a American horror movie from the 70s called Tourist Trap, the late 70s, I believe, that always stuck with me as a kid, and it had really scary mannequins in it. And So my makeup team came up with this process that took many hours, where you could make a live person look like they're made of, ceramic. And we had the woman who made the contact lenses for the clown in It, which were great contact lenses. She custom made these kind of doll eye things for our dead people. And then we put weird wigs on them that were kind of chopped up like a bad wig, like you might see on a mannequin. And so and some of them have their nose cut off, because like a broken mannequin. So there was something about them having that look that I'd never seen, that maybe you wouldn't quite know why they're bothering you. But in fact, they're like broken mannequins coming out of the darkness. And so, and I know this is a long answer, but it's one of those challenges where you want to bring Clive Barker's original vision to life in an original way. And that's a big challenge, and it's a big burden. I mean, it reminds me of my work on Star Trek or Cosmos. The people have high expectations. They don't want you to screw it up,
Yeah. Actually, there's a dialogue when Simon is talking about how we abandon the dead. That was from one of the stories, or you just made it up with Clive when you were writing the script?
His speech about the dead.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. That the speech was actually written by Adam Simon, my writing partner, the guy who wrote the screenplay with. But some of it also came from me, because I was working on Cosmos at the time, and we had a sequence that we didn't use, where about an ancient civilization from about 10,000 years ago, that they would bury their dead in the house under the floor, and which sounds a lot like the Salmonelli thing, but the dead lived with you right beneath your feet. And so I wanted to work that in, that our relationship to the dead has changed over the years. And now we don't want them anywhere near us. We burn them, or we bury them in these cemeteries that no one wants to go to. But there was a time when we were close with the dead. There was a time, the civilization I just mentioned, they would keep the skull like on the mantle over the fireplace for a few months, and then before they put it under the floor. I mean, it sounds very macabre, but By the way, I have to ask you, how did you? Because Hulu is not international; it's only in North America. How did you see the movie?
Well, here in Argentina, we have to download it using torrent.
Got it. Well, I'm happy. I hope it's a good quality copy.
Yeah. Actually, no. I mean, a lot of people use torrent to download. I know it's illegal and everything, but I think it's better people saw this movie. I mean, a lot of directors here saw your Books of Blood. Yesterday we talked about in one of the lives about Books of Blood, Clive Barker, and all that. So yeah, I mean, and a lot of good reviews here in Argentina, and well. But yeah. You asked me, I said, but do you use torrent here in the US, or you cannot not use it?
Oh no, I hear it. I've never used it, of course, but yeah, I'm sure. Yes, people do. Yeah, that happens all the time, and I'm sure they're downloading other countries' movies and stuff. I was just curious. I was very happy to hear.
No, yeah.
And
no,
I do get questions on social media from time to time. How can I see the movie? And these are people who don't live in North America, and I don't have an answer for them. And I can't really say torrent because it's not acceptable in the entertainment business. But I'm glad you were able to see it. I really am.
Yeah, no, actually, I start recommending people if you want to see it. Because a lot of people ask me also where I can see a movie, and one of the things we have a problem with is the access to access this kind of movie. Also, there's a lot of foreign people, Argentinian, films that people cannot see abroad, and a lot of people from different countries where I can see. So well, I also working on with the directors to even add the subtitles. I send you the Sleepwalker,
Right.
but the director hasn't put the. I send you the word. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I get angry with these people. Say, come on, you do the good thing. You have to, make it available to other people.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. You have to have the subtitles.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for last time we talked, you told me that I was doing like a producer, and thanks to this network, I start collaborating with different production, and now they have asked me to produce. I don't know how to do it honestly, but thank you for that. Now I'm full time doing these interviews, writing script with directors. I really love it.
Oh, good.
I'm creating
That's
this
great.
network. So.
Great. By the way, just for the record, the Turkish horror movie I mentioned is called Baskin, Baskin. And if you haven't seen Baskin, it is
I will.
a freaky movie, man. It is just, and
No,
it's
actually,
from Turkey. It's from Turkey. It's
yeah.
great.
And also the new approach to Frankenstein from Iran, Frankenstein in Baghdad. I remember it's incredible.
Oh, that book. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a movie, is it?
No.
Okay.
It's just a
No,
book.
that's one of the great horror novels of in the past 30 years. Yeah. If you haven't read that book, people who might be watching this, it's Frankenstein in Baghdad. That's the title, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I look
it is really amazing. It really is amazing. There are characters in there. There's the one character. I don't know why he stuck with me. Who do you remember the character in there? Who's a guy who's constantly recounting his experiences, these amazing life experiences. But what he's really doing is telling plot lines from American movies, but that no one's seen. Speaking of which, it's just like, what a great that's just a little fun character thing. But the book is a great horror, very postmodern take on Frankenstein. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, and again, I think the book. It's the disturbing thing about the book is the idea that they present. Not. That's what in films. I hate the jump scares because okay, you scare me, but that's over. It's like a rush. You feel. But the idea, for example, the fear of death as an idea, it's more disturbing. And you will keep after the movie. You will keep thinking about it. And I wanted to ask you about the newcomers. I'm sure you've heard about Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, and Jordan Peele. What do you think about them?
Oh, they're doing the best horror right now in America, anyway. Yeah, without question. They're just again, when the movie Hereditary is just filled with images that you've just never seen. The image of a mother sawing her own head off was, that'll stay with me the rest of my life. That, and there are other things in the movie. At the end of the day, it's kind of a devil worship conspiracy movie, which is a subgenre that's been made and remade many times. But he brought a fantastic new kind of family drama aspect into it and found new imagery. Jordan Peele's just dipping into uncharted territory with his films on race and social issues, and in a great way. And then there's the peculiar Eggers, who's doing something that I don't even know what he's doing. Like, he's in his own zone, and he may be my favorite. He's only made 2 movies. I was at the world premiere of The Lighthouse when he was there with Willem Dafoe. That one you kind of need subtitles for his movies because but I just loved The Lighthouse. It's just it doesn't really fit into any genre. It may be the people trapped in a space going crazy like Repulsion or something. That there's subgenres of some kind, but what an original vision that was. And by the way,
Yeah,
filmed in the same place that I filmed Books of Blood, which is Nova Scotia. In fact, I used his production designer.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you tried to get the cinematographer of the movie Goodnight Mommy, but you couldn't get it. But it's still the
Oh,
cinematography of Books of Blood is amazing. So
oh,
I
I
guess you
tried.
find.
Well, look, I had a Zoom meeting before Zoom meetings were a thing with the director of photography of Hereditary and Midsommar, and he is a Barker fan. He loved the script. It didn't work out. He was shooting a movie with the director of A Woman Walks Alone at Night, the Iranian director. I can't remember her name, but so the schedule didn't work out, and the Goodnight Mommy guy, the schedule didn't work out. Goodnight Mommy is just that's such a beautifully shot film. But I ended up working with the guy who shot a movie called Brightburn, who's a newer cinematographer, and he did a great job. You know, we were going after a filmic look, kind of like a Roman Polanski kind of look to it, you know, or Ingmar Bergman kind of look to it. One of the great horror directors, by the way. His movies are horror. You want to talk about existential horror?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I saw in an interview that one of the movies that really scare you was the Rosemary's Baby. The
Yeah.
the scene, the dream scene, the dream sequence. Do you remember how old were you when how
Well,
when
I the first time I saw Rosemary's Baby was on television. I was by myself, and I was 19 years old, and I was home alone. And I got to the part with the dream sequence, and it
yeah.
got to the moment where Rosemary says, "This isn't a dream. This is really happening." And I turned off the TV. I'm like, I'm out. It was so chilling. And I think that dream sequence I would put it as possibly the greatest dream sequence of all time, in that it really does capture what a
Mm,
dream feels like. And I've studied it so many times, and my dream sequence doesn't get anywhere near that. But,
mm,
you know, I look at that dream sequence, I look at some of the stuff David Lynch has done. His entire movies sometimes are dreams.
mm.
Um, but it's funny you mentioned that, because I kind of was like, I even modeled the wallpaper in Jenna's bedroom. If you look at the wallpaper in Rosemary's bedroom, it's very similar.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. Actually, and in the dream sequence, I also noticed a parallel between that scene and Rosemary's Baby scene, and also you blur some of the the monster faces. That's a very a very interesting research. Where did you get it? Because I've seen it in other movies also. The idea of putting something like a monster or there's something horrible, but to blur it.
Yeah. So, you know, there was a movie, a documentary film. It's on Netflix here, called The Nightmare, and it's a documentary about sleep paralysis.
Oh.
And though it's a documentary, it's terrifying. And they were using a technique where they're literally, and I did the same, where I told my cinematographer to or my focus puller, to be creative with the focus. And we're in a dream state, so just bring it in and out of focus. And so it was a happy accident that when the mother's face turns, rather than showing and there was an amazing makeup job, you just kind of see it a little bit blurry. And to me, it's scarier. So I was emulating a movie called The Nightmare, which I had recently seen, which I highly recommend to the horror fans out there. It scared me.
No, yeah. Actually, the movie Terrify is based on the sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
That's what I think he
And
commented.
and I decided to give Jenna sleep paralysis, partly because it's not often done, And partly because, like Rosemary's Baby, you'll later learn that they probably were in her room measuring her and doing those things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and recently we did a live with a horror actress that Clara Kovacic, who is as here in Latin America and Argentina, horror is starting to grow. There are like actors that have been always been in the genre. In the US, you also have these actors like I know Jeffrey Combs, who played Wayun in PS9. I mean, you know them. And here now we have like our first, horror actor, and this we call her Clara Kovacic, the Scream Queen, Argentinian Scream Queen, and she's like an encyclopedia of horror movies because she started watching movies when she was little, and we arrived to this conclusion: Robert Eggers is an expert in history. His movies are about, replicating his different period of time. Ari Aster is an anthropologist. He wants to take you to a voyage to a different culture. And Jordan Peele is a sociologist. Will you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a great analysis. It's a great analysis. I love it.
Because if you see it, Robert Eggers is like obsessed with replicating the language. I mean, I started watching without subtitles. Yeah, and for me it was impossible to understand. I said, this English expression, I know some old English expressions. I said, come on, what language are you talking? So I had to, But I'm glad to hear you have the same problem.
No, no, I saw it in a theater, so it had very good sound, but I probably couldn't understand half of it. And it's the same in The Witch. But I love your analysis of those three kind of scientific branches. And I think that there's real truth to it. And that's it's fascinating, actually. I never thought of that.
No, yeah, I mean, because in a way, Jordan Peele is using allegory to talk about social. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the last, great director who used allegories, I think, is George Romero, because George Romero used the zombie genre to talk about racism. The first movie is practically a criticism on racism, and I think Jordan Peele is using the same. I mean, because I don't see Jordan Peele as a horror director. It's more like allegorical director. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's very true, and it's particularly in the movie Us. In the last act, the final half hour of Us, the allegory takes over, and it becomes a dance movie. Suddenly the allegory and the narrative combine into one thing, and so when the woman is dancing, and that becomes the story in a way, and it's a little abstract. It becomes a little bit abstract. So he went with the full-blown allegory before he returned us back to the story, to the plot. And you don't really know exactly what's going on in Us. He never really tells you. Mm-hmm. He lets the allegory become the story. And that happened. I saw a movie recently, an Australian horror film. I saw it on, Amazon, and it's about a mother with Alzheimer's who wanders into the woods and comes back 3 days later, and something's different about her. And I can't remember the name of the movie. It came out like 3 months or 6 months ago. Maybe someone out there watching can tell us the name of this movie. But the whole thing is it's a horror movie. Make no mistake, it's very scary. But it's an allegory for getting old and aging parents and how we view aging and death. And it's a very interesting film because a similar thing happens at the end, where the plot goes away and the director just embraces the allegory, and the final 10 minutes is all just imagery and allegory. Now, and I think some people might be very frustrated because it's like you didn't have an ending. But if you see the movie, you'll see why it's successful. And I wish I could remember the name of it because it's one you guys should seek out if you haven't seen it. Somebody tell me the title out there.
Yeah, we'll try to contact the director. We did a live with an Australian, a newcomer from sci-fi and horror, an Australian director. Jesse O'Brien, who did a movie called Arrowhead. It's like a sci-fi, and it's a low-budget film, even though it's a very ambitious idea.
Arrowhead,
I
I
mean,
haven't
if
seen
you,
it. I'm
yeah,
gonna write it.
I
I'm
mean,
gonna write it down.
yeah, don't worry. I send you. You have to check the emails because I've been sending you all the. I
Okay.
have like this encyclopedia. But yeah, Arrowhead, Jesse O'Brien. If you want, I can contact you with him. I mean, it's great. It's a very talented Australian director, and he also did a horror comedy, and now he's planning to do a straight horror. But again, and what about sci-fi? Are you planning to return to the idea of an anthology? Because I know Ronald Moore did produce Philip Dick Electric Dreams, and I think I saw his name there.
Yeah. Yep. For Amazon. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm hoping to resume production on the Orville.
Oh,
which
great!
Is right that middle one.
There's a lot of fun for the Orville here.
And what I would say about the Orville is it's very anthological in that we tell a science fiction story, a different one every episode, and they're often allegories for various different things. And so though it's the same characters every week, I kind of view it as an anthology that could be about any one of the characters, and is a completely new science fiction concept every week.
A trivia. I was watching Philip Dick Electric Dreams, and I think I don't know if you watched it, but the second story where is Anna Paquin playing this character post-apocalyptic scenario. He's trying to save books, and one of the books he wants to save is fiction from Borges. So I think Ronald Moore read Borges too.
Well, yeah, Borges. It all goes back to Borges in some ways. I mean, the greatest. By the way, I just want to. I don't know if I told you. I live 2 blocks from an amazing Argentinian restaurant.
Oh.
And I order there all the time. It's real. It's a grill, of course.
Yeah. By the way, I know this quarantine and everything, but I told you that we are in Buenos Aires and Latin America. We're always organizing until the quarantine. We were always organizing, these reunions, meeting events. When we get the directors and writers from sci-fi, would you come to Argentina I don't know, 2000?
I would love to. In a second, I would love nothing
maybe
more.
We can do something, 2 years from now. I was thinking, start, because now in Latin America, again, not only in Argentina, there's a new wave of genre, science fiction, horror, and I'm talking now I'm talking to people in Colombia. There's a horror writer you should read, is Mario Mendoza. It's been translated to English. It's very popular. I call him the Colombian Stephen King. And also there's a movie, because now directors in Latin America, they are using Latin American mythology in horror movies. So to bring something original and, from here. And there is also all this... well, I can send you everything by mail, but
please do. By the way, so I saw someone ask the name of the restaurant. It's the Argentinian Grill. It's called Lala's, and it's on Melrose Avenue in Hollywood. And it's it's been there for 30 years. It's an amazing restaurant. Absolutely delicious.
I remember the last time we talked, I asked you a question that you told me, well, I have to think about it. The idea, I wanted to ask you again, maybe, because I asked you about what ideas you have been expressing through your writing. And I know it's a difficult question. Have you thought about it?
I haven't thought about it because I don't really. I wish I was. I've been writing for a long time and made a lot of stuff. And is there a theme running through is there an undercurrent? I don't know. I mean, adapted myself. I mean, it's mostly science fiction, I guess. I guess that the kinds of stories that I'm most attracted to tend to have a horror element, or maybe a questioning of reality, a rephrasing of reality somehow, or an unraveling of reality, you know. But I don't mean to just kind of elude the question, but I don't know that I'm that deep, you know. I don't know what kind of scientist I am. I'm trying to think of what you were saying earlier about these other filmmakers. I don't know if I really am any one thing. I don't know. I would have. You're welcome, but someone's thanking. I can see. I didn't realize I could see comments. You're welcome for the work on Star Trek. Thank you for saying so. But I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question. You would think at this point with this body of work that I could say I was this kind of writer, but you know, I'm proud that I write different things and that I've adapted to do different things over the years. But you know, I don't know. I tend to gravitate toward high concepts. I don't think I could write a straight cop show, or you know, I think I do gravitate toward big ideas that examine things through a science fiction lens. But what does that mean? I mean, a lot of people do that.
Well, if you ask me as a viewer of, I've seen, I've seen, you know, watching your work. I think there's a lot of an idea of well, you said it before, but it's the idea of looking new ways to see reality. Maybe because reality is really complex, right? And even in Books of Blood, there's the idea of reality is not what it looks like. We are just looking. This is like a hologram of reality. And in the case of Book of Blood, the real reality, as we call it, is hell. We are living in hell, and we use glasses to avoid seeing that. That's what I saw in Books of Blood. But then, if you see Cosmos, it's the idea that, okay, the universe is not so simple. It's so complex that we cannot understand it. I mean, maybe it's even more complex than now we thought it is. So I think this idea, I mean, it's existential, but not in a pessimistic way like Lovecraft. I think it's in an optimistic way. That's my impression. I don't know if I'm correct or not.
Yeah. Well, I do like working on projects that are optimistic. I don't know if you lost me. Yeah, you're back.
Here. Yeah.
I do like optimistic, kind of forward-thinking. You know, I'm proud of my work on Star Trek and Cosmos, and I think one of the reasons they've lasted for so long is because they are so wildly optimistic about the future and embrace diversity and depict diversity and truth. And you know, they're both science fiction shows. One's a science show, and they're utterly honest and forward-thinking, optimistic shows. And even Books of Blood is kind of optimistic. I mean, it's a happy ending for one person anyway.
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, in a very disturbing way. Yeah.
Well, all the characters are looking for a happier place, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean the monologues of the how you say the character, the Mary, I think, are really, you know, so disturbing and sad at the same time. I love that when you mix the drama, because there are some scenes. I mean, I watching this couple who do these terrible things, but there are some interaction within this couple and Mary that they look like a scene from a drama, right? Not a horror. So you say, wait, I'm watching a drama or a horror? Oh, no, horror then drama. That was intentional.
Yeah, I mean, a good horror story doesn't know it's a horror story. You know,
Yeah.
and the ones that do tend to lean on jump scares and have familiar rhythms. And there's a place for those kinds of stories, I guess, you know, that says, this is a horror movie, therefore we will do this. And we just tried to tell some good stories and ground them as much as we could, because if you don't ground it, it can become very silly very quickly. Maybe Books of Blood wasn't as graphic or scary enough for some people. It may not be what everyone expected, but if you're, you know, it's the kind of Clive Barker movie I would want to see, because it does emphasize the psychological components of what's going on. And that's what, like, Hereditary did so well. Like, you have to be involved with the characters. They can't just be people to be killed, you know.
Yeah. We have that. We have that. We are doing YouTube videos. We are interviewing and doing these videos with different writers. I don't know if you remember Ricardo Romero. I always recommend this, The Janitor and Eternity, this novel he wrote. And he said that before destroying a world, show me what you are going to destroy. Let me, you know these people before you do awful things to them, I think. And that's a mistake that a lot of horror film directors are doing in, mainstream. They just present you a world and they destroy it. So, okay.
Well, and in some cases, I think that works. You know, you mentioned George Romero and the masterpiece Dawn of the Dead. We find these characters in the midst of a zombie apocalypse, but we do get to know them in that context. So, and of course, he's obviously one of the great filmmakers of all time. And Night of the Living Dead, I could argue, is the most influential horror film of all time. There's a real strong argument to be made. But yeah, I mean, we wanted, the Jenna story, you had to kind of be in Jenna's headspace. And some people have said, oh, it takes too long to get going, the movie. And I can see what those people mean. On the other hand, I look at, and granted, this is a very old film, it's really interesting to watch a movie like The Exorcist, where nothing scary happens for 45 minutes. Like, it's crazy. Because I remember showing it to my 16-year-old goddaughter, and I'm like, this is going to scare this. She's going to have nightmares forever. And we're 40 minutes in, I'm like, she's bored out of her mind. So, I think maybe Books of Blood has a little bit of a throwback in that regard, I was doing, but, no.
Yeah, I think we live in a time where people are so they feel so anxious because social media and all that they want to see everything right now, and I that's the thing I love about Ari Aster Midsummer. It's like a voyage, and I never felt so relaxed being seeing something so disturbing.
Well,
I mean, really.
Midsommar is really a great movie. It's kind of falls into that subgenre of the Wicker Man, or the horror cult movie of sorts. But what's brilliant about it is it takes place entirely during the daytime, and to make a movie scary that takes place in the bright sunshine is really something. It's really something.
Have you met Ari Aster?
No, I've never met. I met his cinematographer. I've not met Ari Aster. No, maybe one day I hope to.
Which here a lot of newcomers ask me, which advice would you give to adapt a novel? I mean, because there's these two sides. One says, well, you have to keep, do everything as equal as possible. Another side, no, you have to build something new, but keep the essence, the idea, the sensations, which for you are the best way of adapting a horror novel.
Well, I haven't adapted a novel, but in terms of Clive's stories, let's say the Book of Blood story,
we're ending.